The storm raged on, unleashing its fury upon the frosted pines. Inside the den, the pups stirred. Hunger gnawed at their bellies, pulling them from sleep. The firstborn lifted his head, sniffing the air. He smelled the familiar sense of milk and earth, but also a new aroma, masculine, wild, and tinged with wood smoke. His ears pricked. Was that his father? He glanced at his littermates. They stirred, whimpering softly, their eyes still closed. Their mother, sleek and watchful, lay coiled beside them. As the pups began to nurse, the mother let out a long sigh. The pups, too young to understand, snuggled closer to her, seeking the warmth of her body. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of purple and orange. The pups, now sated and sleepy, nestled against each other, their mother's low growls a soothing lullaby. As the hours passed, the storm outside gradually subsided, leaving behind a world transformed by snow. The silence was profound, broken only by the soft snores of the pups. The mother wolf, ever vigilant, kept a keen ear out for any disturbance. Suddenly, a twig snapped. She stiffened, her eyes flashing open. A shadow flickered at the edge of her vision. The pups stirred, sensing their mother's alarm. Before she could react, a shape darted past, a streak of gray against the white snow. A small bird, its feathers ruffled by the wind, hopped awkwardly on the ground, chirping frantically. Startled by the unexpected visitor, the pups whimpered, seeking solace in their mother's side. The mother, however, remained motionless, her gaze fixed on the struggling bird. She didn't move, didn't make a sound. She simply watched as the tiny creature floundered in the snow. Moments stretched into what seemed like an eternity. Finally, the bird, exhausted and defeated, collapsed in the snow. The mother then slowly rose, her movements fluid and graceful despite her injured paw. She approached the bird cautiously, her head lowered. She sniffed it gently, then nudged it with her nose, pushing it back towards the den. With the prey secured, the mother returned to her pups, her movements quick and efficient. She tore the bird into pieces, ensuring each pup got its share. The pups, their earlier fear forgotten, ate with gusto, their small jaws working furiously. As they ate, the mother wolf kept a watchful eye on them, her gaze unwavering and protective. The pups, their bellies full, nestled back into their mother's warm fur, their earlier fears replaced by a drowsy contentment. The mother wolf, her instincts telling her they were safe for now, allowed herself a rare moment of relaxation. She closed her eyes, the growls rumbling deep in her chest, a sound that spoke of comfort and security. Outside the den, the wind continued to moan, but inside, a different sound prevailed, the soft, even breaths of 3 pups, each a testament to life, a flicker of hope amidst the eternal winter. The sun, peeking shyly through the clouds, cast long shadows across the den entrance. The pups, their eyes bright with curiosity, tumbled over each other, their playful nips and yelps echoing in the hollow. The mother wolf, watching them, couldn't help but smile, her early attention easing. She knew the dangers of the world, but in this moment, she reveled in the innocence of her pups, their joy a balm to her weary soul. Her gaze, though never strayed far from the entrance. The world might be harsh, but her pups, she vowed silently, would learn to navigate it, their spirits unbroken. As the day wore on, the pups grew bolder, their explorations more daring. The mother, patient and watchful, allowed them their freedom, guiding them with her gaze. She saw in them the potential for strength and cunning, the promise of a future pack. Their laughter echoed in the den, blending with the wind's mournful song, creating a symphony of resilience and hope. In that secluded den, cradled by the roots of an ancient pine, life persisted, tenacious and defiant. And as the sun began its slow descent, the mother wolf knew that her pups, nurtured by her love and tempered by the harsh world, were ready to face the coming night, and whatever challenges awaited them beyond the den. When pale light finally seeped into the world, it was filtered through veils of snow still tumbling from the sky. The forest was no longer the same. The wind had redrawn it overnight. Trails were buried. The river, once a winding silver vein, lay frozen and silent. Even the tallest pines stood hunched, their limbs bent low under the weight of ice. Inside the den, the air was heavy with exhaustion. The mother had not moved from her post at the entrance, eyes fixed outward through the narrow crack in the stones. Every muscle along her shoulders and flanks stayed taut, as if one wrong breath might let danger slip in. Her injured paw was swollen and stiff now, the fur around the wound clumped dark with dried blood, yet she kept her weight evenly balanced, refusing to let weakness show even to her own pups. The firstborn stirred, blinking against the cold light that cut across the floor. His brothers lay beside him, their breaths shallow and quick, tiny bodies trembling under the fading warmth. Hunger gnawed at his belly like teeth. The scent of milk was faint now, drowned under the sharper temps of the mother's wound. Then movement, a shadow flickered across the snow outside, followed by the crunch of light footsteps, not the heavy prowl of the night's intruders, but something lighter, quicker. The mother's ears twitched forward. She inhaled sharply, and the firstborn caught it too, a scent he knew, the father. He appeared at the entrance, a dark figure against the white. Frost clung to his muzzle, and his eyes were bright, but his gait was uneven. Between his jaws hung the limp body of a snowshoe hare, still warm. Relief surged through the pup like fire through dry grass. He tried to stumble forward, but the mother stepped aside first, her head pressing briefly against the father's neck. No words, no sound, just a silent exchange of everything that had been endured in the long night. The hare was placed before the mother, and she tore into it with efficient bites, swallowing meat to turn into milk. The firstborn and his brothers pressed close, nursing greedily as warmth returned to their bodies. For a moment, the den was quiet again, filled only with the sound of chewing and the soft rhythm of feeding. But peace was brief. The father's scent carried more than hair, blood, beneath it. The mother caught the stale musk of the rival pack. She raised her head sharply, scanning his flanks for wounds. None were fresh, but his fur was dusted with snow in a way that spoke of pursuit. He had not simply hunted, he had been hunted. The father growled low, a sound meant only for her. The firstborn didn't understand the meaning, but he felt the tension coiled tighter in the air. The rivals had not gone far. When the storm eased that afternoon, the parents moved quickly. The den, once a shelter, was now a trap if discovered again. The mother gripped one pup by the scruff, while the father took another, and together they slipped into the white wilderness. The firstborn was carried in the father's jaws, the world swinging beneath him, snow roots, sky, snow again. The cold stung his nose, but the steady beat of the father's stride told him they were not running blindly. They were headed somewhere with purpose. Hours passed. The sky darkened early under heavy clouds. The forest grew quieter, the snow muffling every step until even the sound of their breathing felt too loud. At last, they reached a narrow ravine where wind could not bite so sharply. A fallen pine, its trunk hollowed by rot, formed a natural tunnel. Inside, it was dry, warm from trapped earth, and hidden from view. That night, the firstborn lay wedged between his parents. He did not know that this place was only a stop, not a home. He did not know that survival meant never staying too long. All he knew was that for the first time since his birth, both parents were there, their bodies curved around him like the walls of a fortress. It was the last night the family would ever be whole, for in the days ahead, the forest would test them again, and, this time, the storm would not be of snow and wind, but of teeth and blood. This is a story about loss, but also about courage and strength. Once upon a time, there was a family of wolves who lived in a hollowed-out pine tree. The ravine was a sanctuary only in appearance. Its steep walls broke the wind, and the hollowed pine offered a warmth the storm could not steal. But the forest never forgot its debts. Rival scents still rode the air, drifting down like ghosts that had not yet decided to leave. 3 days passed in a fragile calm. The father hunted each dawn, returning with rabbits, sometimes a grouse. The mother's wound began to close, though her limp lingered. The pups grew stronger. Their legs wobbled less when they explored the edges of the hollow. The firstborn, bolder than his brothers, often stood at the tunnel's mouth, nose twitching at the scents carried in from the wider world. It was on the 4th morning that the wind shifted. The father had left before first light. The sky was the color of steel, heavy with the promise of snow yet to fall. The mother stood at the tunnel's mouth, ears forward, her body blocking the pups from stepping outside. Her posture was not relaxed. It was taut, as if each gust of wind was a messenger whose words she didn't trust. The firstborn smelled it then, the same musk from that night in the old den, the scent of hunger and violence. His fur bristled, though he did not yet know why. The mother herded them deeper into the hollow, growling under her breath. The attack came without warning. A shadow dropped into the ravine, a lean grey wolf with scars across his muzzle, eyes hard and flat. 2 more followed, their paws scattering loose snow down the slope. They had found the family. The mother launched forward before the firstborn could even whimper, slamming into the scarred wolf with a snarl that echoed against the stone walls. The pups huddled in the dark. The sounds outside were cahosnerals, the thud of bodies hitting earth, the sharp yelp of pain. The firstborn, trembling, crept toward the entrance despite his brother's pressed warmth. Through the slit of light, he saw his mother fighting with a ferocity that belied her limp. Her teeth found the neck of one intruder, but the scarred wolf tore at her side, crimson staining the snow in blooming circles. Then another scent, the father. He came from the slope above, hitting the scarred wolf with the force of a falling boulder. Snow exploded around them as they tumbled. For a heartbeat, hope surged. The parents fought back to back, teeth flashing, their growls a rhythm of survival. But the rivals were not alone. Two more shapes emerged at the rim of the ravine, larger, heavier. One leaped down, crashing into the father. The other circled wide toward the hollow. The firstborn's instincts screamed. He darted backward, pressing himself between his brothers and the far wall. The intruder's head appeared in the entrance, jaws open, hot breath cutting through the cold. The pup's world shrank to the gleam of those teeth. A blur of black and silver struck from the side his mother. She drove the attacker into the snow, her body shielding the tunnel. But in doing so, she exposed her flank to the scarred wolf. The bite came swift, deep. The sound that tore from her throat was not a growl but something raw, half warning, half farewell. The father's roar split the air. He tore free from his own opponent, hurling himself at the scarred wolf. The clash was brutal and short. The scarred one fell, but so did the mother. The snow drank her blood eagerly. The father stood over her, chest heaving, muzzle red. He nudged her neck once, twice. She did not move. The firstborn felt something snap inside him. His paws carried him forward until he was at her side, pressing his tiny body against her fur, still warm but cooling fast. He licked at her cheek, the taste of salt and iron filling his mouth. The father's growl pulled him back. There was no time to mourn. The remaining rivals were retreating, limping, but they would return. The father seized one pup by the scruff, then another. When he reached for the firstborn, the pup resisted for a heartbeat, eyes fixed on the still shape in the snow. Then the father's teeth closed gently but firmly, lifting him into the air. They left the ravine under a sky that began to snow again, covering the crimson patches, erasing the scene as though it had never been. But the firstborn knew. The scent of his mother, warm, fierce, alive, was already fading from his nose, replaced by the cold bite of the wind and the lingering musk of the dead. That day carved something permanent into him. It was the first lesson the forest gave without mercy. Strength alone does not promise survival, and even the fiercest guardians can fall. A harsh wind clawed at the forest, driving snow into swirls that stung the eyes and chilled the lungs. When the first rays of sunlight broke through the clouds, the world was white, the trees heavy laden with new fallen snow. Somewhere below, a lone wolf howled, answering the rising sun with a mournful song. But in the ravaged ravine, there was no response. The male wolf shook himself, aware of the weight of his responsibility. His mate was gone, taken by a rival's attack, leaving him the sole guardian of his pups. With a final sniff at the snow, he picked up the three of them, cradling them close, burying their scents deep within his own. Then he started out of the ravine, taking a roundabout path that would keep them away from the prying eyes of their enemies. As he moved, the pups stirred, whimpering softly, their whimpers muffled against his jaw. Their cries tore at his heart, but he swallowed their sounds, driving them back into his belly with the warmth of his body. His firstborn, the strongest of the litter, pushed his way to the front, pressing his nose against his father's teeth, whining as he was jostled along. "It's all right," rumbled the father, his voice a low reassurance. "I won't let anything happen to you." And so they left the ravine behind. The forest was silent, save for the crunch of his paws on the newly fallen snow. And in that silence, the father vowed to make his mate proud, to shield his pups with his life if he had to. He owed her that much. Hours passed, measured by the lessening whimpers and the deepening silence. As the sun climbed higher, the temperature rose, the snow softening underfoot. The father quickened his pace, driven by instinct and fear. Every rustle of leaves, every snapped twig made him whirl. Every shadow seemed to mock him with memories of his mate. But his resolve never wavered. He would protect his pups, even if it meant sacrificing everything. When the firstborn, tired and cold, struggled to keep his paws moving, the father would set him down, then lift another, walking with them in turns until one of them lagged behind. The father would gather them all close, pressing them into the hollow of his chest, the scent of his fur a reminder of their bond, their survival. By the second night, the pups were weak, their whines reduced to rasping breaths. But the father's love was boundless. He kept moving, avoiding other wolves, hunting when he could, eating little himself, preferring to hand scraps of his kill to his pups, watching them grow fat while he grew thinner. He was a father now, fierce, protective, driven by a primal need to nurture and guard. On the sixth day, the forest changed, opening up to a wide, moonlit clearing. The pups, sensing the shift, perked up, yipping feebly at the prospect of open spaces, of new smells. The father smiled, a wolf's version of a smile, baring teeth and tongue in a silent snarl of happiness. Then danger came. A coyote, lean and hungry, slinked out of the trees, its eyes fixed on the pups. Before the father could react, the coyote lunged, knocking one of the pups off his feet. The father snarled, lunging forward, teeth bared, hackles raised. The coyote, startled by the sudden ferocity, hesitated, allowing the father to snatch the pup from its grasp. Growling, he retreated, backing the coyote away, shielding his young with his own body. The coyote, realizing it had met its match, slunk back into the trees. For the first time in days, the father allowed himself a moment of rest, settling down with his pups, his gaze sweeping the clearing, alert for any sign of danger. As the night deepened, the forest sighed around them, the wind whispering secrets to the trees, the crickets chirping their lonely songs. The father curled around his pups, their warmth a comfort against the chill of the night, their breathing a soothing rhythm that lulled him into a false sense of security. Yet in the stillness, he sensed a change, a subtle shift in the air, a premonition of what was to come. He didn't know it then, but their ordeal was far from over. Their enemies were still out there, watching, waiting for them to falter. And as the night wore on, the forest held its breath, knowing that soon it would erupt in a battle as old as time itself. By the time the father led them out of the foothills, the snow was no longer falling in endless sheets but in drifting veils, thin enough for light to pierce. The air smelled different here, less of pine resin, more of damp earth and running water. Beneath the crust of ice, the land was stirring toward a new season, though winter still held its grip. The pups were stronger now. Their steps no longer wavered with every stride, and their eyes stayed open to the world instead of half-closed against the cold. The firstborn ranged a little ahead when the path allowed, his nose twitching at every unfamiliar scent. His world was expanding with each step, and though his legs ached, something inside him wanted to see what lay beyond every bend. It was on the second morning in this new country that they found the tracks. They crossed a narrow strip of open ground where the snow was shallow, and there pressed deep into the surface were paw prints larger than the father's. The edges were sharp, made only hours ago. The father paused, head high, sniffing the wind. His ears flicked once, twice, before he herded the pups into a thicket and moved on at a slower, quieter pace. The scent grew stronger as they followed a winding creek. It wasn't just one wolf. It was many, an entire pack. The firstborn could read it now. Layers of age and strength in the smell. Some sharp with youth, others deep and musky with experience. Near midday they reached a ridge where the trees thinned, revealing a wide valley below. The heart of it was a frozen lake, its edges softened by reeds poking through the ice. And beyond the lake, on a low-rise movement, a half-dozen shapes, pacing and watching. The father stood still, his body a study in control. The firstborn crouched beside him, peering through the brush. The wolves below were broad-shouldered, their winter coats thick and healthy. Even at a distance the firstborn could sense their unity. They moved with the ease of wolves who had hunted and fought together for many seasons. One broke away from the group, loping toward the ridge. A pale female, taller than the father, her fur silvered along the spine. She stopped short of the tree line, lifting her head to send a long, low howl rolling across the frozen water. The father answered not a challenge, but not submission either. His voice was measured, a declaration of presence. The silver female's ears pricked, and she howled again, this time with a note the firstborn didn't recognize. Invitation. That night they sheltered near the edge of the valley, close enough for the pack's scent to drift on the breeze. The father paced the perimeter of their hollow in the snow, pausing often to stare toward the lake. The firstborn watched him, sensing the gravity of the choice before them. Joining the pack could mean food, protection, a future. It could also mean bending to another's rule, giving up the fragile independence they had kept since the ravine. As the pups slept, the father lay down beside the firstborn. He did not speak in ways the pup could name, but the press of his head against the pup's shoulder was a kind of question. Are you ready to live by more than your own strength? The firstborn did not know the answer. He only knew that the forest was wide, danger was constant, and storms came in many forms. And somewhere deep inside, a seed of something else had begun to grow in awareness that one day, the choice would not be his father's to make, it would be his. So we left off with our protagonist, the firstborn son of the White Wolf, having his first glimpse of the world outside of his family's cave, and his dad is now leading him out of the cave to go meet this big, important she-wolf that they met the day before. Let's get right into it. At first light, frost glittered along the edges of the reeds, and the valley lay in a pale hush. The father stood at the hollow's mouth, his breath curling in the still air. Without a sound, he nudged the pups into motion, leading them down the slope toward the frozen lake. The scent of the other wolves thickened with every step, rich, layered, undeniable. It clung to the snow, to the brush, to the very air, until the firstborn felt as if he were walking inside the smell itself. His ears twitched at faint sounds ahead, paws crunching over ice, a low murmur of growls, the occasional high whine of younger wolves playing. They reached the lake's edge where the silver female from the day before waited. Now, when we left off, this silver she-wolf appeared very tall to our young protagonist, and he's gonna say it again here, emphasizing just how much bigger and stronger these other wolves are than he and his siblings. Close now, she was even taller than the firstborn had imagined, her eyes a piercing amber that seemed to weigh and measure each of them in turn. So this is the moment where the wolves are gone. Now meet up with this she-wolf and her pack. And the father wolf, he doesn't really want his kids to go straight up to them, so he stays back a little bit and kind of just like keeps watch. Like, hey, everything's cool, let's chill. The father halted a few paces away, his posture neutral but alert. The silver wolf's gaze lingered on the firstborn. Something in her eyes softened a flicker of recognition, as though she saw not just a pup but the shape of what he might become. So there's some significance there to the fact that she's looking at him. Maybe she can sense that he's gonna be a good leader someday. Maybe she just remembers having pups and that brings back some feelings for her. But either way, it's important that she takes notice of him. She gave a short, sharp bark, and from across the ice, the rest of her pack emerged from behind the rise. They come in a loose, confident line, 6 in all, coats thick with winter health, heads high. The largest was a dark male with a scar running from his ear to his jaw, his amber eyes nearly matching the female's. He moved with the calm of one who feared nothing in his domain. So we've got the leader of the pack here, the big silver female that they've already mentioned, and then this other male, the dark male with the scar. He's gonna be important as well. There's gonna be some conflict between him and the father of our protagonist. We can already tell that just by the way that they describe him, the dark male, with his scar and his confidence and the fact that he's just chilling, on his territory. The father and the scarred male met halfway across the snow. No words passed, but their bodies spoke, tails stiff, ears forward, heads level. They circled once, twice, breaths steaming in the cold. The pups huddled behind the father, the firstborn straining to see between their legs. A decision was made in silence. The scarred male stepped back, and the silver male, the leader of the pack, she moves forward, touching her nose briefly to the father's. Then she turned toward the rise, motioning with a flick of her head for them to follow. So the leader of the pack, she acknowledges the father and his sons, but she doesn't really give them any indication that they're welcome or not welcome. She just kind of is like, alright, come on, let's go. And so they're gonna go to their territory. The firstborn gets to see just how nice this other wolf's territory is. It's way better than his own, and he realizes that his dad knows that because that is why he wanted to join this other pack. The territory was richer than anything the pups had known. Dense pine thickets where the wind died. A creek whose water still ran beneath a thin skin of ice. Open meadows crisscrossed with the scent of deer and hare. But the firstborn noticed more than just the land. He saw how the wolves moved around one another, how the younger ones deferred to the older, how the silver female's glance could send the quarreling wolves apart without a sound, how the scarred male's mere presence kept the perimeter watchers sharp. So not only is this a richer territory, it's also a well-run territory, and that's what the father wants his pups to see. Like, look at this place, look how great it is, look at how well it's run. That night they slept in the shelter of a rock wall where snow could not gather. The firstborn lay between his brothers, but his eyes stayed open, watching the silhouettes of the strange wolves against the fire-bright moon. He listened to the cadence of their low voices, the way their howls blended into one seamless chorus. He began to understand. Survival here was not about the lone strength of teeth or speed. It was about moving as one body, striking as one mind. The forest was too vast, the threats too many, for a wolf to stand alone forever. As sleep finally claimed him, he imagined himself not as the pup in the shadow of others, but as part of that chorusist voice carrying across the valley, strong and sure, not as a follower but as something more. The seed planted in the snowstorm of his birth pushed its first green shoot toward the light. The days in the new territory settled into a rhythm, one the firstborn had never known in the wandering life with only his parents. Each morning began with movement. At first light, the pack gathered near the frozen creek, where the scarred male clearly the alpha signed tasks with silent gestures and a few short growls. Hunting pairs slipped into the forest, sentinels took their posts along the ridges, and the younger wolves remained near the heart of the valley under the watch of older sentries. The firstborn, still small but growing quickly, was not yet allowed on the hunts. Instead, the silver female whom the firstborn had begun to see as the heart of the pack oversaw his training. She was patient but exacting, correcting his every mistake with a nudge, a nip, or the sharp snap of her tail. He learned the language of the pack postures, glances, the shift of ears that spoke louder than howls. He learned how to move silently over crusted snow without breaking through, how to read the wind so scent flowed toward him rather than away. She taught him to freeze in place at the sudden call of a sentinel, to melt into shadows when danger passed nearby. Hunting lessons began with games. She would hide scraps of meat and send him to find them, forcing him to circle downwind, to ignore false trails, to trust the pull of his instincts over his impatience. Often she paired him with older juveniles wolves, a season ahead of him, who pushed him, sometimes cruelly, into sprints and wrestling matches. The firstborn did not shy away. He learned to hold his ground, to use leverage rather than size, to read when an opponent's strength was fading. One afternoon, the silver female led him and two older wolves to a meadow where snow had been trampled by hooves. She showed them how to follow the broken trail of a small deer herd, keeping far enough to avoid being seen, but close enough to sense when one animal strayed. When the moment came, she exploded forward with a speed that left the firstborn stunned, her body flowing over the snow like water. They didn't bring down prey that day. This was a lesson. Not a kill, but the firstborn felt the spark of something deep and fierce ignite in his chest. That night, lying among the pack under a windless sky, he replayed the day's chase in his mind, the unity of movement, the unspoken coordination. He thought of the days when survival had meant only reacting, running, fighting in chaos. Here survival was a craft, a strategy. The father watched him quietly in those days. They rarely spoke in the language of touch anymore. The pack had claimed them both in different ways. Yet the father's gaze followed him during training, and once, as the firstborn returned from a lesson, they passed close enough for their shoulders to brush. In that brief contact, the firstborn felt his father's approval, wordless but solid as stone. By the end of the moon cycle, the firstborn could cross the length of the meadow without breaking. The snow crust could vanish into a thicket so completely that even an older hunter had to double back to find him. His legs had filled with muscle, his chest broadened, and his eyes had taken on the same alert focus he saw in the seasoned wolves. But the silver female was not done. Strength is nothing without the pack, her gaze seemed to say each time she turned him back toward the others. Learn them as you learn yourself. The firstborn began to watch the pack more closely, not just the hunts, but the quiet moments. Who deferred to whom? Which wolves took the choicest pieces of meat? Who guarded the pups when the alphas were away? He began to sense currents beneath the surface, alliances, grudges, unspoken rivalries. He didn't yet know it, but these lessons in silence would one day matter more than the lessons in snow and blood. The moon was a thin silver claw in the night sky when the call came. A sharp bark from the scarred alpha cut through the valley, pulling every wolf to their feet. The firstborn had been dozing near the outer edge of the pack's resting ground, but the moment he heard it, his muscles tensed. This was not the casual signal of a training run, this was the call to a true hunt. For the first time, the firstborn was summoned to join. He felt the silver female's eyes on him as she passed, her tail brushing his flank in a fleeting gesture that was half warning, half blessing. The pack moved out as one, a ripple of gray, black, and silver flowing through the snow. They fanned into a crescent shape, slipping between tree trunks, paused soundless. The firstborn stayed near the center, close enough to watch the veterans, but far enough forward to see the trail. The prey's scent reached them quickly. Elk, fresh, sharp, mixed with the musky tang of a rutting bull, and the lighter, more frantic trace of cows and calves. The herd was on the move, hooves breaking through crusted snow. The alpha set the pace, ears locked forward. The silver female ranged wide to the left, a dark male to the right, the formation tightening like a noose. The firstborn's heart pounded. Every breath tasted of the hunter iron of his own blood, rushing the electric charge of unity. He kept his head low, nostrils wide, copying the older wolves. They sighted the herd in a clearing below. Shadows shifted among the pines, the air full of steam from dozens of breaths. The alpha's tail flicked once. The wolves split, melting into the tree line. The firstborn followed the silver female's lead, keeping parallel to the herd's flank. Then, the signal, a low rolling growl from the alpha. The forest erupted. Wolves burst from the shadows, driving the elk forward. Snow sprayed in glittering arcs under pounding hooves. The herd bunched, then broke apart, panic fracturing its unity. The silver female surged ahead, targeting a younger cow lagging behind. The firstborn ran at her flank, legs burning, each bound pulling him closer to the prey. The cow veered toward the tree line, desperate for cover. The silver female cut her off with a snap of her jaws, forcing her back into the open where the others could close in. The firstborn lunged, aiming for the hind leg, just as he'd been taught. His teeth met flesh, and the cow stumbled, bellowing. For a moment, triumph surged through him until the bull came. The big male elk wheeled around, antlers lowered, charging to protect the fallen cow. His massive frame loomed suddenly out of the snow, hooves striking the ground with bone-cracking force. The firstborn froze for a heartbeat too long. The silver female's snarl snapped him out of it. She darted between him and the bull, drawing its attention away. Two other wolves slammed into the bull's flank, forcing him to pivot and giving the firstborn space to retreat. His chest heaved, the shock of almost being gored still rattling in his bones. The cow was down within seconds. The pack swarmed her, ending it cleanly. The alpha stood over the kill for a moment, head high, before stepping back to allow the others to feed. The firstborn hung back, catching his breath. The silver female approached, her amber eyes locking on his. There was no scolding, only a look that told him she had seen both his success and his hesitation. When meat was passed to him, he took it with a mixture of pride and humility. His first true hunt had left him exhilarated, but also aware of the thin line between triumph and death. That night, curled in the warmth of the sated pack, he replayed the moment the bull had charged. He imagined what would have happened if he'd stood frozen a heartbeat longer, if the silver female hadn't intervened. Gratitude burned deep in his chestnut, just for her. But for the truth the hunt had given him. Skill meant nothing without awareness, and instinct meant nothing without control. From that night on, he swore to sharpen both. Winter's grip loosened as the days stretched longer. Snow still lay heavy in the shaded places, but patches of dark earth were emerging in the meadows, and the air carried the faint, green promise of spring. For the firstborn, life in the pack had become both routine and challenge every day, honing his hunting skills. Every night sleeping in the warm coil of bodies beneath the stars. Yet, as the land softened, something colder began to stir inside the pack. It started subtly. A hard stare from a young male named Kor, older than the firstborn by a season, when they returned from a training run. A shoulder check in passing, the smallest delay in sharing food. At first, the firstborn brushed it off as rough play, but the pattern sharpened with each encounter. Kor was strong, fast, and ambitious. The firstborn could see it in the way he watched the scarred alpha not with loyalty, but with a measuring gaze. The older wolf had begun gathering a loose circle of supporters among the juveniles, wolves who shared his swagger and his hunger for status. The firstborn had never sought rank. His place in the pack came from the silver female's favor and his growing record in hunts. But that, perhaps, was the problem. Favor could be resented. One afternoon, during a mock chase meant to sharpen reflexes, Kor accidentally barreled into the firstborn, sending him tumbling into a drift. Laughter wolfish sharp rose from the others. The silver female broke it up with a glare, but her absence the next day on patrol gave Kor the opening he'd been waiting for. It happened near the creek, where the ice had thinned into treacherous patches. The group was meant to be tracking hare, but Kor kept drifting closer to the firstborn, circling him like a wolf testing prey. Without warning, he lunged it with a playful nip, but with the full intent of a challenge. The firstborn dodged, teeth bared. They circled, snow scattering under their paws. Kor was larger, but the firstborn was quicker, his training sharp in his muscles. He feinted left, drew Kor's weight forward, and spun to snap at his flank. The bite landed just deep enough to send a clear message. A warning growl rumbled between them, neither backing down. Before it could escalate, a bark cracked through the air, the scarred alpha himself. He strode into the clearing, amber eyes burning. In the stillness that followed, no wolf moved. The alpha's gaze shifted between the two young males, weighing them like stones in his jaw. Then he gave a single, decisive huff and turned away, signaling the patrol to move on. It was no punishment, no overt favor, but in the silence, the firstborn understood. The alpha had seen him hold his ground, and had allowed him to walk away unbroken. That night, the silver female lay down beside him. She said nothing, only pressed her nose briefly to his cheek. before settling against his side. Her warmth carried an unspoken truth. Strength wasn't just in fighting, but in knowing when not to. Still, the firstborn knew the challenge hadn't ended. Korra's eyes followed him in the shadows, bright with unfinished intent. And somewhere deep inside, the firstborn began to realize that leadership in a pack was not won solely by tooth and claw. It was a game of patience, allies, and timing. I'm here to talk about the pack. You're a member of a pack, right? Well, I am too. That's right. I am a writer, which means I am part of the wonderful pack of creators here at a digital studio. And let me tell you, being in a pack is everything. Our pack has helped me write stories since the beginning. From the moment our executive producer brought me aside years ago to share feedback on my work, I knew I was going to learn a lot. When we started working together, I was an awkward, inexperienced writer who was afraid to share her work. But our pack leader had faith in me even when I didn't have faith in myself. And our pack is full of experienced storytellers, so there was no shortage of advice or help when I needed it. We push each other to improve and take risks and support each other when we need it. And that's what makes our pack so special. We're like a family. So today, in honor of our pack, I wanted to share with you this excerpt from my urban fantasy series featuring the wolf pack. This is the third book in the series. If you haven't read the first two books yet, please go check them out. This scene is actually pretty pivotal because it shows the pack dynamic in action and features some important character development for the protagonist. Let's get into it. The thaw came fast that week. Snowmelt swelled the creek until it foamed over its banks and the valley floor softened underfoot. The air was thick with new scents, fresh shoots pushing through the earth, the musk of deer moving down from the high ridges, and something else. A smell the firstborn didn't recognize at first, sharp and rank, carrying the faint tang of rotting meat. It reached the pack's heartland on the second morning after the melt began. The scarred alpha called the senior hunters together, his posture rigid, tail low but unyielding. The firstborn was surprised when the silver female flicked her tail toward him, pulling him into the circle. Kor was already there, his yellow eyes narrowing when their gazes met. The alpha led them north along the creek's swollen banks, moving fast and silent. The scent grew stronger with every step. The firstborn's hackles rose. Whatever it was close. They found it on the border of their territory, a deer carcass, half-eaten, its flanks torn in a way no wolf would make. The smell of the kill was overpowered by the rank musk of coyotes, many of them. The tracks around the kill told the rest. A large pack, bold enough to cross into wolfland. The alpha's ears swept back. Coyotes were not usually a threat to healthy wolves, but in numbers they were thieves, opportunists, and dangerous to the young. If they were growing bold, it meant they were desperate or testing the wolves' strength. The alpha split the group. The older wolves would circle wide to flank the intruders. The silver female would lead a smaller team to cut them off from retreat, and to the firstborn's surprise, she placed Kor and him together in that second group. They moved quickly through the undergrowth, keeping downwind. The firstborn kept his eyes forward, ignoring the tension at his side. Kor said nothing, but his breathing was slow, controlled a hunter's breath. They caught the coyotes in a shallow hollow near the tree line, 7 of them, lean and sharp-faced, tearing at the carcass of a hare. The silver female signaled once with her tail, and the wolves exploded from the brush. Being in a pack makes you stronger. Not only do you have the support of your packmate, but you can cover more ground and take on bigger challenges than you could alone. A lone wolf can only hunt so big, but a wolf pack can take down prey that would be impossible for a single wolf. Working together is also just really fun. The energy and excitement you get from being in a pack is unmatched. Plus, when you're in a pack, you don't have to worry about things like food or shelter. You know that your pack will take care of you. Being in a pack just feels good, like you're part of something bigger than yourself, something strong and powerful. And that's why I love being part of the pack here at a digital studio. Sure, there are challenges that come with working in a pack, like coordinating schedules and making sure everyone is on the same page. But the benefits of being in a pack far outweigh the challenges. The support, the creativity, the sense of community, it's all worth it. So here's to packs everywhere, to the friends who support us, challenge us, and help us be the best versions of ourselves. Thanks for listening, and thanks to our pack for making these stories possible. 2 nights after the coyote skirmish, the forest held the uneasy quiet that comes when predators are watching predators. The pack moved differently, now closer together, more often with 2 sentinels posted at once. The firstborn could feel the tension coiled in every paw step, though no one spoke of it. The trouble came at dawn. A faint, sharp bark, half alarm, half pain echoed from the southern ridge. The firstborn jerked awake and saw the scarred alpha loping into camp, his right shoulder matted with blood. Behind him trailed two hunters, their fur ragged with scratches. The scent of bear hit the firstborn's nose before the story was even clear. The alpha had led a patrol to drive a young black bear away from the lower creek. They'd succeeded, but not before the bear had swung a heavy paw raking deep across his shoulder. He could walk, but every movement was stiff, and the wound would slow him for days. Normally, the silver female would take command when the alpha was injured, but she had left before dawn with two hunters to scout the eastern border. They wouldn't return until nightfall. The remaining wolves looked to the alpha, waiting for orders. His gaze swept the pack, pausing on the firstborn. For a heartbeat, the younger wolf thought he'd misread it, but then the alpha stepped forward and pressed his muzzle briefly to the firstborn's cheek. It wasn't just acknowledgement, it was a handover. The firstborn froze. He had never led more than a training group, never given commands that carried the weight of survival. Yet now, every eye was on him. He swallowed the instinct to glance at Kor, who stood just behind the hunters. Instead, he straightened his neck, tail level, and began issuing signals. Two wolves were sent to reinforce the southern ridge. Another pair took positions along the creek. The rest were split into hunting and guarding teams. He assigned Kor to the hunting party not as a slight, but because Kor was fast and aggressive, perfect for driving prey into an ambush. They moved out within minutes, the pack responding to his commands with the efficiency the silver female had drilled into them. The day tested him in every way. The hunting party returned with a young deer, but only after a long chase that forced the firstborn to reroute patrols to cover their absence. Midday afternoon brought a flash of movement along the northern treeliner, lone coyote testing the border. The firstborn didn't overreact. He sent a small pair to shadow it until it withdrew. By dusk, the silver female returned to find the pack fed, the borders unbreached, and the alpha resting under guard. She studied the firstborn for a long moment before lowering her head in a slow, deliberate nod. That night, as the pack settled into the rock-sheltered hollow, the firstborn lay awake beneath the weight of the day. He'd felt fear of failing, fear of being challenged, but he'd held the line. More than that, he'd felt something else, something sharper and heavier, the responsibility that comes when the safety of many rests in your decisions. It was not a feeling he would ever forget. He thought back to the first time he'd heard his father's stories of defending the borders, how the stories had made him feel small and out of place, like a kid still when he wanted to be out hunting. He remembered the pride he'd felt when the alpha had taken him aside all those moons ago, telling him he was ready to start border patrols, real patrols where the safety of the pack rested on his decisions. Ready or not, the firstborn had been thrown into responsibility before. He'd survived then and he was surviving now. It was different this time. Now there was a pack looking to him, looking to their new leader. Now it was his turn to be a pillar, to be steady and strong for the pack. He closed his eyes, the weight of his ancestors pressing down on him, urging him to be worthy. He was the firstborn son of the most cunning wolf in the forest. He was the pack's hope against the encroaching darkness, and he would not let them down. Welcome to the channel. Spring's thaw had transformed the valley. The creek now ran fast and clear, carrying the scent of new life down from the high slopes. Green shoots carpeted the meadows, and the air hummed with a faint rustle of creatures moving through the undergrowth. It should have been a time of ease. Food was plentiful, and the pack strong, but the firstborn had learned that abundance often drew danger as surely as hunger did. The danger came from the west. The first signs were faint. Unfamiliar wolf scat along the far ridges, paw prints pressed deep into soft earth, the faintest trace of strange musk riding the wind. Then one afternoon, the scouts returned with a clear report. Another pack, large and bold, was moving closer. The scarred alpha led the patrol that went to confront them. The firstborn went to. He was nearly a year old now, big enough to hunt, strong enough to fight. Besides, his father had not asked for a volunteer. The others were a mismatched lot. The silver female who led the second shift, lean and swift, her fur the color of storm clouds. Kor, the largest of the wolves, thick-furred and slow to anger, but whose loyalty was absolute. And finally, Detch, lithe and quick, his dark eyes missing nothing. They followed the creek until it curved through a narrow gorge. The walls were steep and slick with moss. It was here they met the intruders. They were big wolves, thick-furred and broad-shouldered, their eyes bright with the confidence of numbers. Their leader, a red-furred male with a torn ear, stood at the center. His posture was not cautious. It was challenging. Words were exchanged in the sharp, silent language of tails, ears, and teeth. The red wolf made it clear they intended to claim the valley. The meeting broke in violence. The gorge erupted with snarls and the crash of bodies. Wolves clamped jaws on flanks and shoulders, twisting and slamming each other against the stones. The firstborn found himself locked in combat with a pale-furred male nearly his size. Teeth flashed, paws slipped in the mud. Instincts took over. He fought as he had been trained, relying on speed and agility to dodge snapping jaws and raking claws. But the stranger was strong, and the firstborn slowly found himself at a disadvantage. Just as he thought he might be overwhelmed, a blur of silver shot between them. The female landed on the stranger, driving her teeth into his shoulder. She fought with the ferocity of a Sheba protecting her cub. The firstborn used the distraction to get his footing. He launched himself at the nearest opponent, slamming into his chest and sending him sprawling. But the respite was brief. The red leader was on him in an instant, jaws snapping. The firstborn dodged, then lashed out, catching the wolf across the nose with his sharp canine. The red wolf howled, momentarily stunned. The firstborn took the chance. He scrambled up a rock outcropping, away from the melee where he could see the whole of the gorge. Below him, the battle raged. Despite their smaller numbers, his packmates fought with the skill and tenacity that the alpha had drilled into them. But there were too many enemies. One of the pale wolves broke from the fight, racing toward the creek. He slid down the muddy bank and disappeared into the swirling water. The firstborn hesitated, torn between the need to help his packmates and the call of the hunt. The sight of the retreating wolf brought back everything he had been taught about taking the shot, about exploiting weakness. He dropped down from his perch and raced after the fleeing wolf. He had to make this count. If he brought down the leader, the rest might scatter. He hit the ground running, crashing through the undergrowth, leaping over logs and rocks, always keeping the creek to his right, knowing the water would slow his prey. Up ahead, the fleeing wolf slipped and fell. The firstborn was on him in an instant, teeth bared. But the red wolf rolled away, scrambling to his feet. In that instant, the firstborn saw the torn ear, saw the wild glint in the red eyes. It was the leader. This was his chance. Summoning every ounce of strength, the firstborn lunged. His fangs sank into the wolf's shoulder, tearing, ripping. The red wolf howled, thrashing wildly, trying to shake him off, but the firstborn held on, his muscles burning, his lungs screaming for air. He dug his claws into the soft earth, anchoring himself as the red wolf thrashed. Slowly, the struggle ebbed. The red wolf's struggles grew weaker, his gasps for breath more ragged. Finally, the thrashing stopped. The red wolf slumped to the ground, his eyes glazed over. The firstborn stayed on him, panting, his body trembling with exhaustion and the thrill of the chase. When he finally got up, the gorge was quiet. The remaining wolves were gathered close, their eyes on him, waiting. The firstborn knew in that moment that his life had changed. The hunt was over, but the responsibility of the kill, of leading his pack into a new future, had just begun. A few moons had passed since the gorge. A few moons of awkward shifts and hard edges in the den. The pack moved through their routines, hunting, patrolling, guarding the pups, but the air carried an absence as tangible as scent. The father's place in the sleeping hollow was empty. The familiar cadence of his stride gone from the sound of patrols returning at dusk. The scarred alpha's wound from the bear attack still slowed him. He limped after long chases and rarely joined the hunts now, delegating more to the silver female. But even she could not be everywhere at once, and gaps in the pack's structure began to show. Patrols came back late, border scents went stale before being refreshed. It was during one of these lapses that the firstborn made his move, not out of ambition, but necessity. A report came in from the northern ridge, a pair of coyotes trailing the deer herd, edging closer to the pup's range. The silver female was already leading a hunt to the south. The alpha, resting his bad shoulder, called for someone to take a small party north. The firstborn stepped forward before Kor could open his mouth. "I'll go," his posture said, tail level, head high, gaze steady. The alpha's amber eyes studied him for a long moment. Then, with a single flick of his ear, he gave permission. Kor came with him, along with two younger hunters. The air between the firstborn and Kor was taut with old rivalry, but neither spoke as they moved out. Snow still lingered in shaded pockets, melting into cold streams that cut across their path. They found the coyotes near the ridge crest, picking at the bones of a winter-killed deer. The firstborn signaled for the others to spread wide, cutting off escape routes when the wind shifted. Carrying their scent to the intruders, the coyotes froze. One bolted left straight into Kor's path. The other tried to dart downslope, but the firstborn was already there, his body driving it into the snow. The skirmish was brief. Both coyotes fled limping into the borderlands. The deer remains would feed ravens and foxes, not enemy scavengers. On the way back, the firstborn caught Kor watching him not with open challenge, but with the measuring look of a wolf recalculating. No words passed between them, but the absence of mockery spoke volumes. When they returned, the alpha met them at the hollow entrance. The firstborn dropped into a respectful crouch before lifting his head again to meet the older wolf's gaze. The alpha gave a low, approving rumble acknowledgement in its purest form. Over the next moon cycle, the firstborn was given more patrol leads, more say in how hunts were coordinated. Some wolves accepted it easily, especially the younger ones who had trained alongside him. Others older set in their ways watched with guarded eyes, as if waiting for him to fail. The silver female offered no overt praise, but she positioned him carefully in hunts, pairing him with different wolves each time, forcing him to learn every strength and weakness in the pack. More than once, he noticed her watching from a distance when he issued a signal or diffused a brewing quarrel. By the time the new season's pups were born, the firstborn had become a constant presence at the center of the pack's movements. He was not yet a leader in title. Wolves had begun to look to him when the alphas were absent, and with every decision he made, every hunt he led, the memory of his father at the creek's edge grew sharper, not as a wound, but as a weight he carried forward. So I asked you guys if you wanted me to try writing some fan fiction based on a prompt, and this was the winning prompt. So here is my shot at writing some wolf start. The first thunder of the season rolled over the valley at dawn. It was low and distant but heavy with promise. Rain would come, swelling the creek and washing the scents from the borders, a dangerous time for a pack. When scent trails vanished, intruders could slip close before anyone knew. That morning, the silver female left to scout the southern ridges, taking to hunters with her. The scarred alpha remained in the hollow. His shoulder was stiff from old wounds. That left the firstborn overseeing the heart of the territory. The storm broke sooner than expected. By midday, rain swept in sheets through the valley, flattening the meadow grass and turning the creek into a foaming, restless vein. The air was thick with shifting scents. There was prey, predators, and something else. It came on the wind first, wolf, musk, sharp and unfamiliar. The firstborn froze, nostrils flaring. This was no lone wanderer. The smell was layered, multiple wolves, moving together, and they were close. He gathered a quick patrol, Kor, two younger hunters, and a quiet, dark-furred female named Sira. They moved swiftly through the rain, keeping low, following the shifting current of scent toward the northern border. They found them near the broken pine that marked the old boundary, 5 strange wolves, broad-shouldered and lean from travel, circling the edge of the territory with an almost casual confidence. Their leader was a dark brindled male with eyes like wet stone, his posture a challenge wrapped in ease. The firstborn stepped forward, tail high, but not aggressive, signaling the line of the border with his body. The rain plastered his fur to his frame, but he held his stance steady. The brindled male's lip curled. He stepped closer, paws landing on the wolf's side of the invisible line. The message was clear: "We do not fear you." The firstborn's growl cut through the rain. It was low, controlled, warning. Kor flanked him silently, Zira moving opposite, their presence tightening the formation. For a long moment, no one moved. Then one of the strangers lunged. The fight was fast and brutal. Rain blurred the edges of every shape, paws slipped in the mud, and the air filled with snarls and the sharp scent of blood. The firstborn found himself locked with the brindled leader, their jaws snapping inches from each other's throats. The stranger was stronger, but the firstborn was quicker, darting in to score a bite along his shoulder before springing clear. Kor brought down another wolf with a bone-jarring tackle. Zero darted in to harry the flanks, forcing the intruders to split their focus. The firstborn seized the moment, driving the brindled male back step by step until the stranger's paws crossed the borderline again. The intruders broke off, retreating into the rain-soaked trees with sharp, frustrated barks. The patrol stood in the downpour, chests heaving, watching until the shapes vanished completely. When they returned to the hollow, the scarred alpha rose from where he'd been resting, eyes scanning each of them. His gaze lingered longest on the firstborn, mud-streaked, sides heaving, but unbowed. The alpha gave a slow, deliberate nod before settling back down. No words were spoken, but the meaning was clear to every wolf who saw it. The firstborn had not just defended the border, he had led. That night, as rain drummed against the rock walls of the hollow, the firstborn lay awake. His body ached, but his mind was alight. He could feel the shift in the air around him. The younger wolves met his eyes more readily. Even Kar's usual guardedness had thinned to something almost like respect. The storm had not just washed the valley, it had begun to wash away the last of their doubts. And that's the end of part 1. I hope you guys liked it. If you did, please let me know in the comments and tell me what you think will happen next. Thanks for listening, and see you next time. For the past few weeks, we've been reading about a wolfpacker's perilous journey to find a new home after their valley was destroyed by a landslide. We've watched them struggle through grief and loss, fight against the harsh elements and confront dangerous rivals. But now the rain has stopped. The skies are clear and the wolves have reached a beautiful meadow where they can finally rest. In the heart of the pack is a young male, a firstborn son whose father is the alpha. Together they've endured many battles and hunts, strengthening their bond as much as their muscles. But now the firstborn feels the weight of something new pressing down on him, something bigger than himself. Even though there is plenty of prey in the valley, the scarred alpha spends most of his time resting. His limp has worsened with the damp and the wolves can sense that he doesn't have much strength left. One evening when the sun dips low, turning the ridges to fire, the silver female calls the pack together. She is the mother of the firstborn and the mate of the alpha. Like the rest of the pack, she's been struggling to keep going, but she knows that soon it will be up to someone else to lead the way. Standing beside her is the firstborn, the young male whose time has almost come. At his shoulder is Kor, his older brother, always ready to lend support, and just behind him stands Sira, the daughter of the alpha, whose loyalty to her father is matched only by her fierceness. As the pack gathers, they form a loose ring, their paws pressing the damp earth, their eyes shifting between the silver female and the alpha. Then something extraordinary happens. The alpha steps forward. He circles the firstborn once, the weight of his gaze like the press of a storm. Then he stops in front of him, their eyes level. Slowly, deliberately, the alpha lowers his head until his muzzle brushes the firstborn's shoulder. It's a gesture charged with meaning, a silent transfer of authority from one generation to the next. A murmur ripples through the pack, a sound between breath and heartbeat. No one dares to speak, but all understand what they have just witnessed. The alpha is passing on his role to his son. With the dignity of one who has fought and won for many seasons, the firstborn doesn't flinch. He stands very still, the air sharp in his lungs. In that moment, he feels the weight of every season behind him, his mother's last stand in the ravine. The cold nights under his father's protection, the first time he led a hunt, the battles fought at the border, and now this. When the alpha steps back, the silver female tilts her head and looses a single, clear howl into the reddening sky. One by one, the others join Kor's voice strong beside him, Xerus weaving in like wind through grass, the chorus swelling until the valley trembles with it, and then the firstborn lifts his head and adds his voice. It rings out not as the call of a pup seeking shelter, nor as a hunter marking his place, but as the sound of a wolf who carries the lives of many in his chest. It's a sound born of storms and blood, of hunger and endurance, of every lesson the forest has carved into his bones. As the howl fades, the pack breaks formation and moves toward the meadow. The firstborn walks at their head. His paws touch the same earth his father has once led them across, but his shadow stretches longer in the sinking light. At the crest of the rise, he pauses and looks out over the valley. The creek glitters below, winding like a silver thread through the grass. Beyond it lay ridges and forests he has yet to claim, storms he has yet to weather. Behind him the pack waits, not pushing, not doubting, ready, and with a final breath the firstborn steps forward into the wind. The summit of his journey is only the beginning of another. This story is an example of a hero's journey, a story archetype that appears in countless myths and legends around the world. The hero, in this case, the firstborn, goes through a series of challenges that ultimately change him and prepare him for his destiny. The hero receives help from mentors along the way, such as the silver female, who guides and supports him. And of course, there is the ultimate showdown with some kind of antagonist, which in this case we can assume will happen when the new pack must face other rivals and defend their hard-won territory. Have you ever gone through a challenge that changed you? What did you learn about yourself? Share your thoughts below.